All right, so get this. We're diving deep today into something pretty fascinating. And honestly, it's a little unnerving too. We're talking about subconscious influence. Like how people can persuade us and maybe even manipulate us without us even realizing it.
It's kind of spooky when you think about it.
Right. You know that book Persuasion by Robert Cialdini?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Well, you sent me this YouTube video summarizing it, and let me tell you, this stuff is potent.
Oh, yeah. Cialdini's work is really groundbreaking. You know why? Because he changes the focus.
How so?
Well, instead of looking at the persuasive message itself, he looks at what happens before the message even gets delivered.
So it's not just about the words themselves, but about like setting the stage.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
all about creating the perfect conditions for your message to land. It's kind of like what you do before you plant a seed.
Oh, interesting. So like preparing the soil. I'm definitely intrigued. But I have to admit, I'm also feeling a little cautious here. Can you give me an example of what this persuasion thing actually looks like in real life?
Absolutely. The video has this perfect example. Imagine a good-looking guy asking women for their numbers. Pretty standard, right?
Yeah, total classic social experiment setup. I'm guessing there's a twist, though.
You bet. It's all about location. Get this, when he stood in front of a flower shop, he got way more numbers than when he was just standing on some random street.
Hold on, so just being near flowers made women more likely to give him their number? That's wild, but also kind of unsettling. Are you saying our decisions are that easily swayed by something as basic as flowers? I mean, how much control do we really have over our choices?
That's a really good question. And it gets right to the heart of what Cialdini's talking about. It's not about, consciously deciding. It's
Yeah.
about those automatic associations our brains make.
Subconsciously.
Yeah. Flowers are often linked to romance in our minds.
Mm.
So just by standing in front of the flower shop, he was subtly priming those women to be more open to a romantic approach.
Wow. So he was like a human Cupid, hanging out by the roses. Okay, I'm starting to see how this persuasion thing works, but is it always about things we see?
Not at all. There's this other experiment in the video. They did it with an online furniture store. And they show people different backgrounds on the website.
Okay, interesting. What happened?
Well, the people who saw fluffy clouds in the background, they talked about comfort when they described the furniture.
Interesting. And the others?
The ones who saw a background of coins, they were way more focused on the price.
Whoa. So are you saying the background image actually changed what people valued in the furniture?
That's exactly it. It's like those backgrounds were sneakily shifting their priorities without them even knowing it. Those visual cues, they're like these little primes.
Prime.
Yeah, they activate certain thoughts in our minds,
Yeah.
and then that shapes how we see and react to information.
It's like we're all living in this massive psychology experiment. It's kind of freaky.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've talked about these visual primes. What about words? Can you prime people with words too?
Oh, absolutely. The video tells this story about a salesman. He was really struggling to sell this product that cost $75,000.
Oof. Yeah, I can see why $75,000.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So get this, his solution was to start mentioning that he couldn't possibly charge $1 million for it.
Wait, he actually said that. What did people say?
It was brilliant. All of a sudden, $75,000 didn't seem so bad. By throwing out that crazy high number, he totally shifted how they saw a fair price.
That's pretty smart. But is it really ethical, though? It feels a little sneaky to mess with someone's idea of value just to make a sale.
I see your point.
Yeah,
And it definitely shows why it's important to use these techniques responsibly.
for sure.
But in this case, the product was actually worth the money. He was just using a clever way of talking about it to help people see that value.
So it's not about being dishonest, but about framing things in a way that connects with what people already believe and what they want.
You got it.
Mm-hmm.
The video also talks about an energy drink company. They were having a tough time getting people to try their new drink.
What did they do?
Their solution was simple. They started asking people if they considered themselves adventurous.
That little question had a huge impact on whether people tried the drink.
Totally.
Yeah.
The people who said yes were way more likely to give it a shot. It's because by bringing up the idea of adventure, they were tapping into something people already wanted. So it made them more open to trying something new and different.
So they planted that seed of, hey, I'm an adventurous person, so of course I try this new energy drink. That's powerful. And it makes me wonder, are we being primed all the time without even realizing it?
All the time.
Mhm.
Think about it. The music they play in stores, the
Mm.
colors they use in advertising, even the smells they pump through the air conditioning.
Yeah.
They can all be subtle ways to influence us, shaping our mood and the choices we make.
It's really like we're surrounded by these hidden persuaders. It's kind of mind-blowing. So we've got all these subtle cues and primes that shape our thoughts and actions. Pretty mind-boggling. But is this persuasion stuff always so subtle?
Not always.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be a bit more direct, appealing to our social instincts.
Mhm.
Like, remember that college professor who wanted to get students' parents to fill out a questionnaire?
Yeah, I remember the response rate was super low.
Awful. But then he told the students they'd get extra credit if their parents participated.
Classic professor move. Gotta incentivize those responses. I bet that worked really well.
Oh, it did. The response rate shot up to 97%.
Wow.
And it wasn't about, bribing them. It was about framing the request in a way that made the students want to help their families. It just shows you how strong those social bonds are, even for something boring like a questionnaire.
So it's like persuasion can use our sense of obligation or, wanting to help others.
Exactly. Cialdini calls it the principle of unity.
Mhm.
We're more likely to say yes to people we feel connected to, like family or people in our own group. And it's not just family either.
So we're more easily persuaded by people we identify with, even if it's just a shared interest or like a sense of belonging.
Exactly. It reminds me of this time I was talking to a bank advisor. I was sitting there half listening to him go on about investment products. And then he suddenly says, "This is the product I'd recommend to my own mother."
Wow. That's a pretty strong statement. Did it make you trust him more?
Absolutely. In that moment, I totally felt this wave of trust towards him. You know what Cialdini would say? He'd say the advisor was using that unity principle, creating a feeling of shared identity. We just naturally trust people more when we feel connected to them.
Makes sense. We're social creatures at heart. So this persuasion thing isn't just about techniques. It's about understanding what makes people tick.
You got it. You have to know what people value, what motivates them. Then you can prime them to be more open to your message.
That's so interesting. This whole conversation has really opened my eyes to how we're constantly being influenced every day, consciously and unconsciously. We've talked about visual cues, language, even social dynamics. Are there any other examples of how these persuasion techniques can work?
Well, the video even talks about an experiment they did with babies.
Babies? Really? Are we talking subliminal messages in baby food commercials now?
Not quite.
Yeah.
But it does show you how deep these subconscious processes go, even at such a young age. Get this. They showed these 18-month-old babies a picture of two people standing close together. Then they had someone drop something. And those babies were 3 times more likely to help pick it up compared to babies who hadn't seen the picture.
3 times more likely. That's amazing. It's like we're wired for connection from the very beginning.
Exactly. And it reinforces this idea that persuasion isn't about tricking people. It's about understanding how our brains work, how they process information and react to things.
Okay, so let's get practical. The video mentions some tips for using persuasion ethically. What were some of the ones that stood out to you?
Well, one was this idea of giving free products to family members of customers instead of giving them directly to the customers.
Interesting, like a twist on that college questionnaire example.
Exactly. It uses that family unity and obligation. It also creates goodwill.
Another one that I found interesting was about asking for advice instead of feedback. It seems like a small change, but I can see how it would change the whole dynamic.
Well, totally. By asking for advice, you're putting yourself in a position where you're looking for guidance. And that can make the other person feel like you're collaborating, so they're more open to what you have to say.
That makes sense. It's like you're acknowledging their expertise and making them feel valued. I'm noticing a pattern here. It's all about setting the stage for a positive interaction.
Exactly.
What other tips did they have?
They talked about how important timing is. For example, if you want to ask someone for a favor, the best time is right after they've praised you.
Ah, so you're riding that wave of good feeling when they're already inclined to be helpful.
You got it. It's all about strategy.
The video also mentions something about our environment, like how decorating our surroundings can actually prime us for success.
It might sound a little cheesy, but there's actually research that backs it up. You know, those visual cues in our environment, they can really affect our mindset and how we act. Think about those athletes who visualize themselves winning before a competition.
Right. They're priming themselves for success by creating a mental picture of what they want.
Exactly. And it's not just about visualizing. We can use things like affirmations, motivational quotes, even upbeat music to change our mindset and boost our confidence.
So we can basically hack our own brains by creating an environment that supports our goals.
That's the idea. Instead of letting our environment control us, we can create an environment that helps us succeed.
I'm already thinking about how I can use this in my own life. Maybe a giant vision board above my desk, Or a playlist of power anthems to get me going in the morning.
I love it. It's all about finding what works for you, creating your own personal persuasion strategy.
You know, this whole conversation has been so insightful. It's made me realize just how much we're influenced every day, both consciously and unconsciously. It's fascinating, but it's
Yeah.
also a little scary. If we're always being primed and influenced, do we really have control over our choices?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's something Cialdini really explores in his work. The truth is we're always being influenced by things we're not even aware of.
So we're not totally in control.
Well, it's not that simple. But it doesn't mean we're powerless either.
So what can we do? How can we protect ourselves from being manipulated by all these persuasion tactics?
It all starts with awareness.
Mm.
The more we understand these tactics, the less likely we are to be tricked by them. It's like knowing how a magic trick works. You're not going to be fooled by the illusion.
I like that analogy. So it's about educating ourselves and paying attention to those subtle cues around us.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also about being honest with ourselves about why we do things. If you're about to say yes to something and it feels a little off, take a step back. Ask yourself, why am I really doing this? Is it because I actually want to, or am I feeling pressured?
That's a good point. And what about if we want to use persuasion ethically? We need to be upfront about our intentions. Right?
Absolutely. Persuasion shouldn't be about tricking people. It's about creating a situation where they can see the value in what you're offering.
So it's more about guiding them than manipulating them.
Exactly. It's about understanding your audience,
Yeah.
what they need, what they want, and then adjusting your approach to fit that.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I've learned so much about how persuasion works.
It's definitely a powerful tool, and it can be used for good or bad.
That's for sure. And I think the most important thing to remember is that knowledge is power. When we understand these tactics, we can become smarter consumers, better communicators, and ultimately more in control of our own lives.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
Speaking of being influenced, I actually have a story about how I fell for the favor trap.
Oh, the favor trap. That's a classic persuasion tactic. Tell me about it. What happened?
It really is.
Yeah.
We have more power than we think, and knowing that is a game changer.
Sure. This deep dive has been a real eye-opener for me. It's like I've got this secret decoder ring for figuring out how people think. I'm already looking at ads and marketing totally differently. Now I see all these little ways they're trying to prime me.
That's great. A little healthy skepticism never hurts.
Yeah,
But remember, persuasion isn't always a bad thing. It's all about how it's used.
true. Like that salesman who used anchoring to make $75,000 seem like a bargain. It was clever, but he could have easily used that same technique to mislead people.
Exactly. It's like any tool. You can use it to build something, or you can use it to tear something down. The key is to use this knowledge responsibly and ethically.
So what's the takeaway here? How do we deal with all this subtle influence without freaking out or becoming totally cynical?
I think it's about finding that sweet spot between being aware and being open. You
Yeah.
need to be aware of how we're being influenced. But we don't want to close ourselves off from genuine connection and persuasion.
Yeah, we don't want to be so suspicious that we miss out on opportunities to be persuaded by something that actually aligns with our values.
Exactly. And that's where critical thinking comes in. We need to be able to look at the information we're getting and make smart decisions based on our own understanding of what's going on.
So this deep dive into persuasion has also been a deep dive into ourselves. It's about knowing our own minds, what motivates us, what our weaknesses are, so we can navigate the world with more awareness and purpose.
Perfectly put. It's about being more conscious and intentional in everything we do, from the things we buy to the relationships we build.
Well said. I think it's time to wrap up this incredible deep dive. We've explored this hidden world of persuasion, from flower shops and furniture websites to baby experiments and bank advisors.
We've seen how powerful priming is, the importance of context, and all the subtle ways our brains are influenced without us even knowing. And most importantly, we've learned how to use this knowledge to become more aware, more intentional, and more in control of how we interact with the world.
It's been an amazing journey. I feel like I have a whole new toolbox for understanding how people interact with each other. To our listener, keep exploring this fascinating topic. Pay attention to those subtle cues and influences you see every day. Question your assumptions, and never forget the power of persuasion is real, but so is the power of your own mind.
Until next time, keep diving deep.
And keep those critical thinking skills sharp.